Well, on Christmas Day, the congressman from Rhode Island tweeted Secretary Nielsen, "A second kid in DHS custody died today on Christmas. Did you figure out how many people have died on your watch yet?" Now, it would appear he hasn't received an answer to that, but we know two immigrant children, Felipe and Jakelin, both died in U.S. custody this month. Customs and Border Protection says it's ordered medical checks on every child in its care. But that brings up another question of numbers. Around 15,000 migrant children, including teenagers who cross the border alone and young kids separated from their parents, are being held in U.S. custody in more than 100 shelters across 17 states, from New York to California. The Department of Health and Human Services says their shelters are 92% full. Joining us now is Sahar Aziz, who's a professor of law and director of the Center on Security, Race and Civil Rights at Rutgers University. Thank you so much for being with us on the News Grid. So the U.S. government now says it's going to do a medical check on all children. How many children do they have in their custody? And surely they would and should have been doing this already, no?
Well, they don't know how many children they have, and that's part of the problem, as we saw from the newsreel you showed. The estimate is that at least 93,000 people have come in 2018 as of September 30th, that's what's reported by the government, that have come seeking asylum from Central America. And the primary reason is the rampant gang violence and the lack of control by the government. The government is unable to protect its citizens from the gang violence. And the gang violence is actually a result of a 1996 law that the United States passed, where it took thousands of gang members in the United States and deported them back to Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, where they created two major gangs, the MS-13 and the 18th Street Gang. And these gangs have essentially destroyed those nations and resulted in this mass exodus of refugees.
Sahar, so we don't know the exact numbers, but do we know about the conditions in which these children are being held? Do the facilities that they're being held in, do they have the ability to take care of them?
Well, it depends on the fate of the child. So originally when they arrive, they usually are put in these temporary detention centers, and they're notorious for, they call them the ice boxes, where they're very, very cold. There's not enough blankets. And many of these children get sick. They get a cold, they get the flu, and as we saw tragically with the two recent deaths, it leads to death. So the conditions, particularly in these temporary detention centers, are inhumane for adults, much less for children. And then some children are then moved at some point in time. It's supposed to be less than 72 hours by law, and now there is pressure on the government to make it less than 24 hours. They're moved to then family residential centers, which can be government controlled by ICE, or they could be state controlled, or they could be nonprofit controlled. And so it really depends on the circumstances of those detention centers.
And you know, what a lot of people are wondering today, not just in the United States, but all over the world, is why these migrant parents make their children go through such a treacherous journey, put them in such great danger. Why do they do it?
Well, the news reports make it very clear that what usually happens is the gangs will come and extort the family, and if the family does not pay, then they will kill their children. That's one scenario. The other scenario is they will forcibly recruit their children, either as gang members or as sex slaves for the female children. And again, if they don't comply, they will kill them. And so, like any human being, any parent across the world, that is an unlivable and unacceptable circumstance. So fleeing and taking these extraordinary risks of going 2,500 miles, if not more, to the border of the United States to claim asylum is less dangerous than these gang members' threats on their lives and the way in which they're being treated in their own country. And the other problem is that the police is now either incapable of protecting the people, or they are also corrupt and working with the gangs.
The UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights, Sahar, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights for Migrants, has said that the United States is in violation of international law with its treatment of child migrants. How can they improve things, and are they willing to improve things?
Are they willing to, at least from the Trump administration's rhetoric? The answer is no. Trump wants to put up a wall. Trump wants to change the law such that people coming from Central America cannot by law request asylum. Trump wants to deny any refugees that don't come from European countries, and he's pretty much stated that explicitly during the Muslim ban controversy, is that he does not want the United States to continue on the path of becoming a minority majority country, whereas people of European origin will become less than 50% of the population. And he sees immigration law as a way to stop that trend. And he's targeting the most vulnerable, which are refugees. And then finally, he's made it very clear that he doesn't believe that these people are actually in danger, notwithstanding many reports from credible human rights organizations in the UN that, in fact, those three countries, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, are almost failed states. Now, what will they do? What can they do? They have to put in more resources so that these children, as soon as they arrive to the border seeking asylum, they immediately go to a safe residential center, family residential center, staying with their parents, and then soon thereafter be released until that their asylum claim can be processed, because children do not belong in detention centers, period. And so perhaps it may be necessary in the very beginning for a week, 2 weeks maximum in a safe place. But after that, they should be released, and then their asylum can be processed.
Sahar Aziz, thank you so much for being on the News Grid. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you.